Thank you so much for joining us. All right, joining me now with a slightly different take on the battle for the White House, of course, and who should win. Former advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign, Democratic strategist Richard Goodstein. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, Melissa. Happy to be on with you.
What do you think about the tone that the campaign on both sides took at the end of the week? This really pivoting to race. It does seem like one that nobody wins.
I question or challenge the suggestion that to pivot as regards Donald Trump. Let me tell you what Republicans said about Donald Trump, that he was a racist, bigot, xenophobe, misogynist, and con artist.
But you're going right back to what the campaign's doing at the end of the week.
But I'm just saying, just pivot,
hang on.
Melissa.
Do you think, so you must think it helps Hillary Clinton then, and certainly maybe it distracts from all of the evidence that's coming out and the corruption within the foundation.
Listen, let's talk about the foundation for 1 second.
Yeah.
I hope this campaign is about the comparison between the Clinton Foundation, which provides HIV/AIDS drugs, climate change relief, malaria, 80–90% reduction in the cost of medication, okay, childhood obesity, women's empowerment, versus the Trump Foundation, which bought a Tim Tebow signed helmet and gave money to his kids' private school.
If the Clinton Foundation does all that good work, why does only 10% of the money flow through to those good works? Why does only 90% of it stays within the foundation? Why does Charity Watch say
it's a different model, Melissa?
Yeah, it's not a charity. That's what Charity Watch says.
Please, listen to me. It's a different model. It's not like the Ford Foundation, which itself gives money to good causes. The Clinton Foundation hires people to go into Rwanda and South Africa and so forth to actually deliver services, the malaria drugs, the HIV/AIDS medication. That's what they're doing. So this is a myth.
Why does Charity Watch say when they look at the business model, they can't make heads or tails of it? It is not a charity.
Because it's so different.
So they can't rate it.
Because it's so different. Again, it's not the Ford Foundation. It's not the Rockefeller Foundation, which has a certain model. You apply for grants.
Robin Hood here in New York passes 100% of what it gets in onto its good works. For other charities, we are always advised never go with anyone who's consuming so much.
I don't know whether you're not understanding what I'm saying or you really don't want to believe it. The fact is the Clinton Foundation has a different model.
I don't believe what you're saying because I read what Charity Watch said and I looked at the documents and I can do math. That's why I don't believe what you're saying because I can actually do math.
If you don't believe your eyes what you read, I'm sorry, but that's a matter of public record. I believe what the IRS wrote.
I looked at the IRS records, and they're the ones that say that only 10% is going to charity, and the rest of it is staying within the organization.
Because they're hiring people to deliver the services. The Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, they don't do that. The Clinton Foundation does. And you know what? They're providing 11.5 million people with HIV/AIDS medication that wouldn't have it. The Rockefeller Foundation does not do anything like that.
How do you battle back against the AP report when it shows that more than half of the people who she chose to have meetings with had given money to the foundation? All the emails, as you follow them, as they go from the head of the foundation into the Secretaries of State's office and say this person had tried to get in through the normal channels. They are a special friend. They are a good friend of ours. Please see them. And it's somebody, a foreign national, who has business before the State Department. Do you understand that when people look at those emails, they feel like the State Department was bought and paid for, and they're really concerned about it?
Yeah. So the AP story has been radically debunked because what it didn't include was the thousands of meetings that she had in addition to these few. And look,
those were mandatory meetings that were her job. That was her job. That was her job. Those were the meetings that she had to have.
Let me ask you something,
The meetings
Melissa.
that we're talking about, hang on, the meetings that we're talking about here are the optional ones where she had discretion to do it or not. The AP sorted out the ones where it was her discretion.
Elie Wiesel is a famous Holocaust survivor. Elie Wiesel is a famous Holocaust survivor. Do you think it's a kind of abuse of your position as Secretary of State?
You guys go to that one example because you know the numbers are against you and you can't obfuscate the numbers.
How about Melinda Gates, a world-renowned philanthropist? How about Muhammad Yunus, a Nobel Prize winner?
Those are the same three names that the Clintons said to everyone they saw because they knew the math doesn't help them. So they go to those three names. Are you at all worried about Julian Assange and the fact that he told Megyn Kelly that he's got another shoe that's going to fall on Hillary Clinton?
You know, it's interesting. Julian Assange, who has been charged with rape, is somebody who was reviled on this very network because of releasing state secrets. And now there's this worshiping. Please, Julian,
it's not worshiping. I'm asking
something.
you. There are a lot of people on this network think that he is a criminal and he is a really bad guy. It doesn't change the fact that he's going to release these documents. He is trafficking and stolen goods.
You know who has more to be concerned about?
Wait, hang on. But how are you going to battle back? It doesn't change what he puts out there and the damage it could do, regardless of the source. Do you worry about that?
There's two candidates running for president. Both have concerns, I guess, potentially about releases. Donald Trump's getting his tax returns out there. That's the person who's really at risk. Hillary Clinton has had thousands of her emails already put out there, and they're a big bore.
Richard Goodstein, thank you for joining us. You are a good advocate, my friend. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
That was fun. All right, as we mentioned, Hillary Clinton still holds a national lead in the latest Real Clear Politics average, but now that lead is only slightly more than 6 percentage points. This is Clinton's post-convention bounce. Seems to be losing a little bit of steam here, with some new polls indicating a tightening race in key battleground states. Here with all the details and what to look for in the weeks ahead, pollster and Washington Examiner columnist Kristen Solstice Anderson. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So when you look at all these numbers in the aggregate, what do they tell you?
They tell me that Donald Trump has a really tough road ahead of him and that these debates are going to be critical. We've got just about 70 days left in this campaign. And after we got past the conventions, while Hillary Clinton's convention bounce has faded a little, we've settled into a sort of a new normal that's not a particularly sunny picture for Donald Trump. And as you mentioned before in your initial interview, you know, the really important thing here are these swing states. At the national level, sure, Hillary Clinton is up by 6, but what really matters is how are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton performing in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Florida. Florida has been a bright spot in the polling for Donald Trump as of late, with that Mason-Dixon poll showing him only down by 2. Florida has a lot of electoral votes. You got to get Florida if you want to get to the White House, so that's a good sign for him. But what's troubling is if you look at states like North Carolina, which should be just a gimme for Republicans, that's a state where the polling over the last couple of weeks has not told a particularly good story for Donald Trump. So if I was advising his campaign, I would tell him, look, right now he's in Iowa. Yes, it's a swing state, but it's a swing state with very few electoral votes. He's going to Arizona on Wednesday. That's a state where he's up by a little bit in the polls. I would look at his schedule and I would say you need to be in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida almost every day between now and November.
Is that really what makes a critical difference as the candidate on the ground, or should it be more about targeting, you know, very negative ads in those states?
Well, I think it's got to be a combination of things, you know, but Donald Trump at this moment has really succeeded not by putting a lot of ads on the air. His success and the way he's rallied people has been by getting media attention, and he's way behind, but he gets media attention. And this is why in the 2012 campaign, if you read what the Obama team did, David Plouffe talks about this a lot, where they went through and they looked at the data of every county where they needed to pick up a couple thousand votes here and there, and they used the candidate's time as an incredibly valuable resource and allocated it with precision. And that's what I think the Trump team needs to do. Figure out those counties where he can pick up those pockets of 1,000 votes here, 2,000 votes here, 10,000 votes there to piece together that majority. Absolutely.
That sounds exhausting. What do you think about the strategy of the past couple days where, you know, he's been out talking about bigger issues, talking about immigration, talking about race? You know, some say from a polling point of view, he's not really going to pick up minority votes anyway, so it's a waste of time. Others say it's about messaging and it's about making independents and moderate Republicans feel better about him.
My suspicion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my suspicion is that it's the latter. You know, Kellyanne Conway, who's been brought in to be the campaign manager for Trump, she's incredibly bright, and she knows that the path to the White House runs through, say, the suburbs around Philadelphia, white, college-educated women who are living in places like Montgomery and Bucks County. And they're the kinds of folks who may be looking at Donald Trump and saying, I like him on the economy, but I'm uncomfortable with the way I think he treats other people. I don't know if I think he's a very nice guy. And so this is, I think, him attempting in these last 70 or so days to send signals, hey, I'm not the big bad guy that the media has made me out to be. But again, it may be too little too late.
Yeah, so you would say instead of doing that, focus on these little tiny communities and going there in person and trying to swing those particular votes. That's the way to go?
Well, I think by going to these markets, what's really important is not just the people who show up at your rally, but it's that you then kind of saturate local media news coverage. You wind up on the front page of that paper with a message that's specific to that community. That's why the candidate's time is such a valuable resource and why it needs to be managed so effectively.
Yeah, I heard Kellyanne Conway talking about that on Friday for sure. Beyond that, I mean, what would be your advice? Turning back to the email story, I mean, at this point, highlighting the negativity of the other candidate and keeping it focused on that, do you feel like the story about credibility, whether it's the foundation, the email, any of that, is getting through, or does it make Republicans look bad that they keep, harping on the same thing?
I think the best angle to take on that story is the angle that Hillary Clinton gets to play by a different set of rules, that there are elites and there are average Americans, and the Clintons have been treated by a different set of rules, and they pay more attention to elites rather than average Americans. That sort of flips the traditional narrative on its head. For the last couple of elections, it's been Republicans who have been accused of being the party of the elites, the party of the wealthy. I think if Donald Trump is able to effectively turn that narrative on its head and say, no, it's the Clintons who favor the elite, it's the Clintons who have been getting the sort of special 1%er treatment, I think that does tap into a vulnerability where Democrats aren't used to having to defend against that.
A lot of people have noted that it seems like his tone, at least on immigration, has changed. He's tried to come out and say, no, I'm not for amnesty, and another time he says, well, maybe we can work with people. I feel like anything that's coming out of his mouth at this point has probably been focus grouped to death. Is that a fair assumption, and do you think that this is intentional then?
Well, I bet you Donald Trump would push back against the notion that he's doing any focus groups. He always says that people like me who do polling, he doesn't listen to people like us. But it does seem like he may be getting that advice from someone like a Kellyanne Conway, who has seen that even within the Republican Party, there's a pretty sizable portion that says, look, maybe we at least should have some kind of a path to legal status. And so Donald Trump was able to win large portions of Republican voters in the primary who said, I support a path to legal status. It's not the only issue that matters for his campaign, but I think he now understands, look, we're in a general election. If I stay on my primary message, I'm going to be stuck at 35% of the vote. That's not nearly enough to get to the White House. I've got to go a little broader.
Kristen Soltis-Anderson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The best of street justice is still ahead tonight. I can't wait. Plus, we'll get into all of this with our political panel. Will things get even tighter in this race? We're going to talk about that in just a moment as justice rolls on.